In celebration of the upcoming May 4th release of Avengers Infinity War, I recently... Wait, what? They bumped up the release date? I didn't know. I kinda bummed a ride out as far as I could to avoid any spoilers. I guess everybody else is still outside getting lunch or something. Either way, that's awesome! We get to see the Avengers take on Thanos a whole week earlier! But on the other hand, the schedule for all my MCU reviews is all screwed up now, so well, f it. I guess I'm doubling down on the reviews this week. So let's take a look at Guardians of the Galaxy and Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2.
You're immortal! How?
You said it yourself, bitch. We're the Guardians of the Galaxy.
In Guardians of the Galaxy, we find Peter Quill, a human abducted from Earth years ago, now acting as a thief, becoming the main target of a manhunt led by the genocidal villain Ronan, after he discovered a mysterious orb containing a dangerous power. While on the run, Peter meets and forms a bond with a number of other misfits, including the cybernetic raccoon, Rocket, Gamora, a former assassin for Thanos, Drax, who's obsessively searching the galaxy for Ronan to get his revenge, and Rocket's friend with the limited vocabulistics, Groot. While attempting to protect the galaxy from Ronan, this ragtag group of losers try to learn to trust each other and work together, which they clearly do, spoilers I guess, since there's a sequel set relatively soon after the group defeated Ronan and are now officially recognized as heroes, conveniently for hire. However, their bonds are tested like never before after a job gone wrong, during which Peter discovers that his long missing father is really the living planet known as Ego. With danger looming from every corner of the galaxy, the Guardians need to learn to overcome their differences, discover more allies, and become the one thing they were all missing, a family.
Mantis! Look out!
So right off the bat, I think we can all agree that these two movies were Marvel's first real surprise success, quote unquote, right? I mean, 2008's Iron Man being as successful as it was definitely a surprise too, don't get me wrong, but it definitely wasn't on the same level as the Guardians movies. Like, yeah, Iron Man focused on a drunken billionaire developing a war suit more advanced than anything we've ever seen in real life, but at least it felt more grounded, more realistic. And so it was easier for a lot of people during this year of everything has to be dark, gritty, and realistic to accept a character like Tony in a movie like Iron Man. Guardians, meanwhile, featured so many different, weird, kind of out there type things that caused a lot of people to kind of wave this movie off before it came out. I mean, it's got a whole bunch of sci-fi mumbo jumbo,
Reject.
One X battery.
Creek,
Fire Lord has won!
Lost a Marion.
What's important now is we get the Ravagers' army to help us save Xandar.
nothing set on Earth, and characters not a whole lot of people really knew about, like a talking tree and a gun-toting raccoon. Actually, now that I say it out loud, the idea sounds so ridiculous, I can't imagine it not being a success. And honestly, the same thing applies to Volume 2 if you really stop and think about it. Like, I know it came out later in the MCU during the time when Marvel movies are pretty much guaranteed to make money no matter what, but I think with a concept like Guardians of the Galaxy, you have to be really careful not to go too far out there with a lot of these concepts and sort of alienate the general audience, and I think James Gunn was smart in keeping things more focused on our core characters and keeping the story streamlined before fleshing things out in the sequel and exploring a bit of that universe he created. Now, the problem with that is that the story in the first movie feels a little too neutered, for lack of a better word. Like, this is supposed to be our first big expansion into the cosmic side of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, when we can see a whole bunch of aliens and new worlds and all sorts of cool and interesting things, but we really only follow the Guardians through a bunch of locations we've kinda seen before in a bunch of other movies, like a big prison, a 1980s sci-fi style mining facility, an alien ship. They all even kinda look the same, like everything's so dark and muted. And I honestly wouldn't complain about the locations that much if the story bothered to really explore any of these places, but we just kinda get more of a scenic tour of everything. If it doesn't advance the plot or mean anything to this specific group of characters, it's pretty much non-existent. Probably the worst thing though is that James Gunn takes the tell don't show approach with this story.
Ronan murdered my wife, Ovette, and my daughter, Camaria.
You turned off the artificial gravity everywhere but in here.
I've never really been a fan of that type of storytelling. I've always preferred a movie, book, whatever, just shows me why certain things are important through some kind of action. I don't need my hand held. I don't need somebody to explicitly state why two bad guys are working together, especially if they just reiterate it later.
I promised Thanos I would retrieve the orb for him. Only then will he destroy Xandar for me.
Recently, Thanos lent her and her sister Nebula out to Ronan, which leads us to believe that Thanos and Ronan are working together.
Sherlock!
Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that the plot of the first Guardians is bad at all. I personally thought it was really fun, a nice break in between all these really serious movies Marvel was putting out throughout Phase 2. The jokes and the humor were pretty good, the characters, while assholes, were likable and fun to watch, and the movie overall did a good job at showing us who these people are and how they're different compared to the heroes we see on Earth, like why these guys aren't just the Space Avengers. There are some weird and weak parts, sure, like why is Drax even in the prison in the first place? How does Ronan magically have spies literally everywhere in the galaxy?
We know only that she has been captured.
But we have discovered he has an agreement to retrieve the orb for an intermediary known as the broker.
Our sources within the Kiln say Gamora has her own plans for the orb.
Stuff like that. But like I said, the story in the first movie was fun and engaging, and it was a good introduction to this side of the MCU. In contrast, the sequel feels a good bit more fleshed out. Obviously, it benefits from being a sequel, like we've already been introduced to all these characters, we're used to this idea that there's something more out there in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, so this movie doesn't have to spend as much time setting things up, but it does a pretty good job at introducing a bunch of new elements and fleshing those out as well. We get to learn a bit more about Yondu and the Ravagers. Nebula's turned from a one-dimensional psycho into a deeply layered character, and we get to explore all the main members of the Guardians in a deeper way thanks to the way James Gunn pairs them off and splits them up relatively early on. Now, I would have preferred we got that character exploration while the team stuck together, but I thought it was still done pretty well. Like the last movie, there were some weak points, like random bad guys we never got to see earlier, even though they've apparently been around for a while, but like the last one, most of these are pretty forgivable. In the end, the one thing I thought this movie didn't do as well as the first one was break out a really kick-ass soundtrack. Like the one we got in the last one really helped us feel like the music was an extension of Peter's connection with his mother. It helped tell her story and made us feel what she was like without the character actually being on screen. The soundtrack we got in Volume 2 just felt more like James Gunn grabbed a bunch of random songs he liked and threw them in the movie. They're not bad songs, I like all of them, I just didn't connect with them in the same way I did with the first movie. Like, come on, what moment in Volume 2 really made you feel the way you did at the beginning of the first one? Alright, that's a fucking awesome one, I'm not gonna lie. Moving on to the acting, I thought we got some great performances in both movies. Chris Pratt's a cocky, snarky dick as Star-Lord, but like Robert Downey Jr.'s Tony Stark, he brings enough depth and charisma. He really makes the role more of an entertaining, likable asshole.
Hey,
Barit.
Barit. Look, I'm gonna be totally honest with you. I forgot you're here.
And it's really fun watching him grow from that into this more heroic figure over the course of both movies. It's the same with Bradley Cooper as Rocket. He's probably one of the more layered characters we get in these movies, with just enough time spent referencing his messed up past in both of them to get you emotionally invested in him. You know, despite whatever dickish things he ends up doing to his friends.
Well, later on tonight, you're gonna be laying down in your bed, and there's gonna be something squishy in your pillowcase, and you're gonna be like, what's this? And it's gonna be because I put a turd in there!
Weirdly enough though, if I had to give anybody props for busting out a fantastic performance, it'd be Vin Diesel as Groot. I mean, this dude's a great character. He has some of the funniest and even the most touching moments in both movies, and by the end of either movie, you're left feeling like you want to see more of him. Who knew you could get such a great performance and a wide range of emotion with only 4 words of dialogue? The other 2 members of the team, Gamora and Drax, I wasn't really wowed by either of them. They didn't really have all that much growth in between each movie, and most of the time they just kind of needed other characters to really help bring out the best of their characters. They weren't terrible, but I was kind of left wanting a bit more. The villain, meanwhile, was awful in the first Guardians movie. I mean, Lee Pace did a decent job at playing a bad guy, but does anybody really care to remember anything about his performance as Ronan? It's just so bland and one note. On the flip side though, in Volume 2, we get a much better villain. I don't want to talk about it too much because the reveal of the villain is kind of tied into a big twist in the movie, but I can say that it's a massive improvement. This dude's charming and he's pretty good at making you feel like you should be at ease while still giving you just enough hints that there may be something wrong with the situation everybody's in, so you stay on your toes a little. Moving on, the special effects in both movies were great. Yeah, it's mostly CGI. Y'all know I'm not the biggest fan of CGI, but it looks nice in both movies for the most part. The scenes in outer space and on some of the other planets like Xandar or Nowhere in the first movie, those look pretty damn good. And speaking of the outer space stuff, I think a lot of the space scenes in Volume 2 are way better than the first Guardians, if only because of all the color we get. Seriously, the color palette in Volume 2 is amazing, and honestly seems to be the best we've gotten in the MCU up until this point. It really helps a lot of the already visually interesting scenes, like the fight against the alien monster at the beginning and the time spent on Ego's planet, pop a good bit more, and bring those scenes to life in a way that this type of visual couldn't, for example. Honestly, it's because of scenes like those that make me think that if I had to choose which movie had the better effects, I'd probably have to go with the second one. Yeah, the first movie had a lot of great looking actual physical effects, and Volume 2 features a lot of CGI heavy scenes that are kind of noticeable at times, but that movie had a lot of great looking physical effects too, a lot of great makeup work especially. The first movie kind of failed in the alien department. Like Like, we got mostly normal looking people with some prosthetics or something instead. Some of these guys don't even have makeup on. Damn, how many people were kidnapped from Earth and wound up in space jail before this movie started? Overall, I thought both Guardians of the Galaxy and Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 were great movies. They're both a great change of pace compared to everything else we've gotten in the Marvel Cinematic Universe so far. I personally think most of the jokes and the humor in general work pretty well, and considering how limited Marvel was at the time as far as who they could introduce on the cosmic side of their universe, I think the first movie was a great way of introducing it to the general audience, while the sequel did a pretty good job of branching out and building up this new wider universe. I definitely recommend both of these if you're in the mood for a superhero movie or some kind of space adventure or something like that. Even if you didn't really like the second one when you first saw it, I'd say give it another chance. You never know, you could find out you like it way more than you did before. But anyways guys, that's my take on Guardians of the Galaxy and Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. If you guys agreed with anything I said in this review, or maybe you have your own thoughts about something I didn't mention here, then go ahead and let me know in the comments down below. Otherwise, I will see you all next time. Hey, thanks for watching. If you like this video, then go ahead and click that like button, and if you're new, maybe consider clicking that subscribe button too. I've also got links to my Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, Instagram, and Patreon in the description. You should probably check those out too. And if you want to see more of my content, then you can click the link to my last video. It's right there in the middle of your screen. Alright, and I will see you all next time.